Hi, I'm going to show you a compilation of all the videos that I made discussing Netflix's series Adolescence. But I'm going to preface it by saying this. I have been accused of victim blaming. I'm being harassed in my comment sections on these videos I've put on TikTok. I have had to block so many women. Like I never have to block women, right? Hardly ever. And my only argument is this. Preface, the show was great. I thought it was wonderful, brilliant. I'm thrilled that this show exists, right? I had one issue with it. And my only issue was that I think it would have been good to see more of the victim's backstory, specifically her interactions with the perpetrator, Jamie. Because to recognize whether or not a boy or a young man or even an old man, believe it or not, there are middle aged men that get red pilled. In order to recognize that in the outside world, you have to see how those men and boys interact with women and girls. Because if a parent isn't in all the online forums, if they're not stalking their kid on social media, if they're not seeing what the kids are posting or what they're reacting to, and even if they do see it, they might not even understand it. Like they had that scene in the series where the detective, his son has to school him in what the comments on Jamie's Instagram actually mean because he didn't know. He had no idea what red pill was. He had no idea about the language, the community, what the emojis meant. So if you don't have that knowledge, which I would guess the average parent of a middle schooler does not, the only way you'd be able to recognize that your kid may have been red pilled is the behavior that they exhibit. And you have to see how these boys treat girls when they interact with them. The things they say to them, the physical intimidation sometimes, the stalking, the specific words they use, the language. You have to see that in action because we've been complaining about these kinds of men on the internet for over 2 decades. I've been a woman on the internet for since the early 2000s. And I'm not even up until now. Hello, branding. I'm not even a professional woman on the internet most of that time for 2 of those decades up until the last year or so. I was just a woman on the internet. I wasn't a professional journalist. I wasn't a writer or anything like that. But when you talk about these issues, when you talk about patriarchy, feminism, particularly leftist politics, the things that men leave in your comments. And now, thankfully, they have software and all these platforms that filter out the worst of the worst. But now and then some stuff gets through. The things that men will say to you in your comments for the parents would shock you, would absolutely shock you. Everything from run of the mill misogyny and sexism to straight up threats of violence, sometimes death threats. I get some kind of threat um, of violence in my comments or my DMs on whatever platforms, I would say at least once a week. I don't see them quite as much anymore, again, because of the filtering. TikTok actually kind of over polices the community guidelines violation thing, which is a whole other story. But, and that's just comments. You would also perhaps be shocked by some of the things that men say to women when we're out in the world. If you're a woman, you know. If you're a woman who lives in a large city, you understand how aggressive and threatening catcalling can be to you. Recently, I was on a TikTok live with my friend Yellow Chick, and she had as the prompt a screenshot of a DM that a man sent her saying, in a very creepy way, I think you're really beautiful. We should connect. We should blah, blah, blah. And she said very simply, and this person didn't have a profile picture, so she knew nothing about what this person looked like, how old they were, nothing about this guy. She simply said, I'm not attracted to you. Please move along. Something to that effect. His response was, fuck you. And women who have had this interaction in person, which most of these types of interactions I have had in person, because that is very typical to how a catcalling situation unfolds, not only do you get the cursing at you, the insults, so you must be a lesbian, you must be whatever, the threat of violence is always hanging in the air. And you have to school your face and practice your words. The fact that this is our responsibility is another part of the problem, because how you react to those men when they treat you like that could mean life or death for you. Just like how you react as a Black person in the United States during a routine traffic stop could determine whether you live or die, whether you survive that interaction. So I thought it was important to see how a red pill kid treats women and girls. And we saw a little bit of it with the therapist. But I think it would have been useful to see that with his peers as well, with the girls in his school. And it didn't even have to be a whole episode. A couple of flashback scenes would have been fine. A couple of flashback scenes with the best friend and with Ryan, with Katie's best friend, Katie, the victim's best friend, and also with Jamie's friend, Ryan, who was the kid who we find out later gave him the knife, would have been useful. Like, what does that conversation look like between him and the best friend? What were him and Katie's interactions? Because violence against women and girls always is the result of escalation. It starts out with nasty words, starts out with insults, then moves to intimidation, threats, and then finally acts of violence, oftentimes ending the woman or girl's life. So if we don't know what the escalation looks like, we're not going to be able to stop it. Understanding what those interactions look like will tell you when to sound the alarm, and having that information for the audience, parents, teachers, community members, whatever, knowing what that looks like and being able to recognize it might save that girl's life. I was told I was victim blaming. I was called everything but a child of God in my comment section in the last few days. It has been very, very stressful. There's a day this week that I struggled to get out of bed as a result of it. It was really hard. But this is important. I'm going to keep talking about this because it's important. So in this compilation, I'm going to include some clips from a couple of creators that I stitched. The first one was a woman who was very, 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 very adamant, making the argument that by dehumanizing the victim, we're perpetuating potentially more violence against women and girls. The response to that from viewers was, well, that was the point. You were supposed to dehumanize the victim because the victim is always dehumanized in these stories. If we're educating people on protecting girls and noticing problems in boys that result in violent acts against women and girls, how does continuing to dehumanize the victim as we do in real life help achieve that goal? I think that level of nuance is going to be missed by the typical viewer of this show. Typical viewer. So here's the compilation. It's 4 or 5 videos, and I've tried multiple times to explain my point to people. If they don't get it by now, I don't think they're going to. It's perfectly fine to disagree with me, to say, I see what you're saying, but I don't think that would have added to the story. But that's not what my comments are saying. My comments are accusing me of victim blaming. My comments are calling me stupid, saying that I didn't understand the point of the series. Do you have any idea how long I've been involved in feminist activism? How long I've been reading, writing, protesting, volunteering, advocating for women, both in the world and online? I just haven't been getting paid for it. I told you I've been a woman on the internet for 20 years. I've been doing this kind of thing for 20 years. This ain't my first rodeo. And many of the people who have had similar note, similar criticism, again, like in the series, love in the series, but just this one bit, it would have made it better. They've been accused of the same thing, of being stupid, of not understanding the point of the series, being media illiterate. I was called media illiterate, as was Melanie Hamlet and Rose Hackman. Rose Hackman, author of the book Emotional Labor, who literally has written and researched about this, is a professional, like best-selling author. Mel, who has written multiple pieces for multiple media outlets about these issues, accusing all of us of being media illiterate, which is simultaneously hilarious and terrifying. So here's the compilation. Take a look. Also, after you watch this, if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Head over to my Substack and subscribe to my Substack. It's called The Fine Print. I do more writing over there, and also my podcast is being migrated over to Substack. So here's the compilation.
A girl was murdered, and we spent the whole time sympathizing with the boy and his family and trying to figure out what could have led him to this path.
When I looked at the series and I saw that it was only 4 episodes, I assumed that they were going to get into the background of the victim because of that line they set up from the female cop, who was like, we always focus on the kid who unalived. We never focus on the victim. We always focus on the perpetrator when a man unalives a woman. And when it seemed like the series was wrapping up, and I was like, wait a minute, how many episodes is this? And I realized I was almost done with the 4th episode, so I was almost done with the whole series. I'm like, what? I thought that it was going to be like 6 or 8 episodes, and then the last like 2 to 4, they were going to talk about the girl and actually tell the story of this girl's experience. But they never did that. And that's another bit of it that I was going to get to, but the video I made today earlier was kind of long, so I didn't want to, that video would have been like 30 minutes long. But yeah, I agree with this creator. Where was the backstory? Where was the story about the girl's experience? Where was her story? Which, like this woman is saying, is part of the problem, is the problem. If you humanize women and girls, they wouldn't unalive us. The reason they unalive us is because they don't see us as people. They see us as NPCs in a video game that they can do whatever they want to. The victim is irrelevant to the story. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point we're making. Because the victim is always irrelevant in these stories when it's a man who unalives a woman or a boy who unalives a girl. Our point is the victim should not be irrelevant. And part of learning the victim's story would have been how that kid Ryan was involved. Because why did the best friend go after and beat up Ryan in the schoolyard? Because he was involved somehow. But because we never heard the victim's perspective, we never saw the lead up to it, we don't know how that other kid was involved. So even if you're focusing on the perpetrator's side of the story, by totally ignoring the victim's experience, you're missing half of the perpetrator story. You're missing the lead up. This is a very, I can't believe you can't see how problematic this comment is and that this is the problem. Your comment is the problem. You are the problem. No, 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 no. I'm not talking about her being at fault for what happened to her. I'm talking about showing their interactions leading up to the unalivement and how this crazy freaking kid, the things he said to her, the things he did. I also want to know about that Ryan kid and how the fuck he was involved in all this shit. I want to know about the best friend. Why did the best friend beat up Ryan? Because she knew that Ryan aided and abetted somehow. We find out later that I think he's the one that gave him the knife. I'm talking about humanizing the victim, not blaming the victim. The fact that so many of you are having trouble understanding this is really troubling. I noticed that most of the people who are leaving these troubling comments on my comment section are people that I don't know, that don't really follow me, that I'm just coming up on the FYP. Fine. I thought this was a good comment to respond to because I like the arguments that she was making in this particular thread. That's not his excuse. The detective's bringing up how she was bullying him on social media. And if you're not going to show any more of the interactions between them, there's no context for that. And I understand that the audience for the show was parents and boys. All I'm saying is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can talk to the teenage boys and the parents, but part of telling that story is seeing what behavior the red pill content results in. Because by leaving that out of the story, I think, is they're not giving the parents the full picture. Seeing what types of interactions these boys have with girls as a result of consuming this red pill content, rather than just looking at the Instagram thread like the cops did and totally missing the point and not understanding what was really happening in that comment section. Kind of like this comment section, or the one from the other two videos I've done on this. And the idea that I'm being accused of rage bait, anybody who knows me and know my content, which is how I know that this must be the first time you're watching my content, because if not, I'm really concerned. This is probably the best show I've ever seen on this subject. I think it's the only show in this genre that's really actually directly tackled this subject. My point is that they could have done it better. They only told part of the story. And that I don't understand why no one's getting the argument that people who are making a similar argument to me, that we're not victim blaming, we're just saying that if we had the chance to see some of the interactions and the backstory of that girl's experience in interacting with that boy, we would understand the story better. And the intended audience, the boys and their parents, would have a fuller picture of what this is about. In talking about the victim more and showing the interactions with the victim more prior to her unaliving, you could have told the story better. You could have allowed these men and boys and the parents to understand the story better. Because seeing how it plays out in those interactions is part of understanding what red pill is and what the indoctrination does.
This is precisely my point. Seeing those interactions would have made the message of the show better. I'm not disagreeing that this was the message, that was the audience, but this audience, the message, they're not getting the full picture. They need to see it. They need to see what red pill interactions with women and girls, both online and IRL, actually look like. Because nobody believes you unless they see it or experience it. I've been a woman on the internet for 20 years. I've gotten unaliving threats from talking about feminism, human rights, politics, I don't know, what I ate for lunch. Doesn't matter. And we've been complaining about these men on the internet who are threatening us, insulting us, and in some cases, eventually unaliving us, stalking us. We've been complaining about this and sounding the alarm for 2 decades. And nobody does anything because they can't see it. They don't see us. They don't experience these men and boys like we do. So in addition to focusing on the boy and how his parents failed him, we need to see what it looks like with the peers too. How they're interacting with their peers. Because the audience, I also assume, is teachers. And teachers, it would be helpful for teachers and parents and PJ people to know what that kind of interaction looks like. And we got a little bit of it with the therapist, but that dynamic is different. We needed to see those interactions with the girls. And also, it would have been helpful to see the interactions with him and his friends, because that's how the parents will recognize it. If they're not in the same online spaces than them, if they're not, really paying attention to their education, when they have like activities together, when their friends, their male friends show up at the house to hang out or like play catch in the yard, whatever they're doing, that's when a parent might be able to see some of this stuff. And if they don't know what it looks like, they won't recognize it. If we don't include that part in the story, we won't be alerted that there's a problem until a girl is dead. Because so far, that's what it takes for people to realize that this is a fucking problem. I don't know how much clearer I can make this. I don't understand why y'all aren't understanding this.
There's something that's been really troubling me about the current way in which a crisis in masculinity, a move to the right for young men, has been covered by the media. And it re-emerged this weekend when I was watching Adolescence on Netflix. In a lot of our efforts to address a re-emboldening of the far right, and a lot of our efforts to address a radicalizing of young men and boys that is happening online, in huge part because patriarchy and male supremacy never went anywhere. We are committing the exact same mistake as the systems we are critiquing, which is an obsessive centering of the male gaze, of the male experience, of male entitlement. Chronically centering male experience does not just produce a de facto hierarchy of experience that puts men at the top and everyone else below. It also obviously decenters the experiences of everyone else, including girls and women. In Adolescence, in an effort to understand the actions of a supposedly angelic-looking 13-year-old boy, we end up erasing a lot of the mirror experience of the girl who was killed. We also lean very deep into him, but we don't see him at his worst. This does not just have the effect of protecting the fictitious reputation of this fictitious young boy. It has the effect of shielding the viewer from the sheer vitriol through words and actions that women and girls are exposed to at the hands of patriarchal men, online and in real life. Within patriarchy, we cannot say what's going on with boys and men without reckoning, eyes open, with what they're doing to girls and women. I know what they are doing. It's in my interviews, it's in my DMs, it's all around. Now show it.
This is what I've been trying to explain for days. It's not that I don't understand what the show was trying to do and what the show was really about. And it's not that I'm saying you don't understand what the show was trying to do and how it was doing it and what it was really about. It's that you are misunderstanding my argument. So one more time for the cheap seats in the back. What Rose is saying, that's my argument. Because it's not that I'm upset that you're disagreeing with me. I'm upset that you don't understand my argument. Like, that's the frustrating part. And perhaps in the first video, I didn't articulate this clearly enough, but I'm going to try one more time. This will be like the fourth or fifth time because I've done subsequent videos. And I can tell that the people who are still whinging in my comments and misinterpreting what my actual argument is haven't seen any of the follow-up videos, and also clearly don't regularly watch my content, because if you did, you wouldn't be whinging in my comments. Not to say that you are necessarily whinging, this commenter, but like in general, the theme of my comment section on this subject, a lot of whinging. The point of showing more of the victim's experience isn't about the victim. It's about the perpetrator. They could have given us those scenes without pulling focus away from the point. Because showing this monster, this kid, at his worst would have added to that story. Because we would have been able to see it and how it plays out. And I think that would have given people a more sort of visceral understanding of what it is. Because I still don't think people are getting it. They know that the kid is crazy and the kid is red-pilled and indoctrinated. They know that the girl is no longer alive. But if you don't talk about how we got from A to B, the indoctrination and the emotional instability of the kid is a central part of the story, but it's not all of the story. Because if we don't see how it plays out in the harm he inflicts, you're losing an important part of the picture. Yeah, so for all those of you who have been in my comments insulting me, calling me a traitor, and calling me an apologist, and assuming that I'm claiming that I'm victim blaming, that's what I'm talking about. Showing the lead up to her unaliving and their interactions, their prior interactions. That wouldn't make the kid look any better, because we're not talking about, oh, well, explain, and he was a kid, and let's not ruin his future. No, fuck that shit. That is in no way what I'm saying. If we'd have seen those scenes, he would have looked like an even bigger monster than he looked like then. And if I was a betting gal, I think there might have been a conversation about this in the writing process, perhaps. But I'd be willing to bet the reason why they didn't want to include it is because they thought it might make the kid look like too much of a monster, and the audience wouldn't buy it. Because the way we sympathize with white men and boys, if they made him look, and I understand that argument, if that argument did take place, I understand that angle. Like, if you make him look too horrible, people aren't going to buy it, just because of this natural, tendency we have to believe white men over everybody else, and to like center them and think that they're the best and they're the smartest and they're born leaders, and et cetera, et cetera. Perhaps these creators felt that doing that, showing the actual moment and previous moments where this kid snapped and said some vitriolic shit to this girl and maybe threatened her or something, because we only got his side of that story of their interactions, which was horrible enough. But being able to see what she had to experience at the hands of this kid, which you have to ask yourself when these kinds of things happen, is it the first time or just the worst time? He had been doing creepy, dangerous shit up until that point. Her unaliving was just the escalation of it. Because every time these kinds of kids go out and do a mass pew-pew, every time they unalive their girlfriend, their wife, their whatever, there were always some signs. And the person who ended up being his victim, who ended up unaliving, was probably sounding the alarm about those things. And nobody was listening. The best friend probably was, and nobody was listening. Nobody intervened. Nobody listened to the black best friend. Nobody listened probably to the victim herself, because women aren't believed. And the crazy thing about this is that because the public, the fact that they can't conceive of that kid being that monstrous, and the fact that we know, you and I know, that level of monstrousness is baseline for these kind of guys, that is exactly what we're dealing with. We had to explain in small words and gentle parent a grown-ass man through our experience with catcalling and being threatened, and how with every interaction you have with a man, the threat of violence is always looming like over your head. And the host of the live, Yellow Chick, showed a screenshot of a DM that she got from a guy telling her, oh, you're so attractive, you're so pretty, you're so whatever. No profile pic, so nothing else to go on but this guy's creepy, like weird approach, right? And she just said, I'm not attracted to you, move along, or something like that. And his response was, well, fuck you then. And everybody knows how that interaction goes IRL, right? And usually in real life, we're more polite than that because we know that being polite, our life depends on not making this dude feel a certain kind of way. Because if he feels a certain kind of way, we might die. That's what we had to see. Because if you don't see it, and we had proof, we had a screenshot of this crazy. And I'm sure many women in that live had screenshots of similar interactions in their DMs. But unless they see it in real time, they don't understand. They're not gonna truly get it. This is a very nuanced issue. And this is a part of it we need to see. And if we're not seeing or talking about this part, we're losing the thread. How would you know? You're supposed to see her as someone you know in real life. The message is to check on your boys, make sure. The rest of the comment is like something like, make sure that they're not involved in red pill. How would you know? How would you know if your son has been absorbing red pill content unless you see his behavior? Because for most parents, the kid's up there on the internet, you're not standing over their shoulder observing them on the internet every day. All you have left to observe is their behavior. So how are you going to know what to look for as a parent if you don't see or hear or read in the chat or whatever how they're talking to girls and understand really what they're saying? Because the text chain in that IG post that they talked about in the first couple episodes, the adults didn't even understand the context of that comment thread. They didn't even understand what she was saying to him and what everybody else in the comment was saying about what she was saying. If the message is to check on your boys and make sure they're not consuming red pill content, absent standing over their shoulder every moment of every day they're on the internet, the only way you'd be able to tell that is to hear or see, observe how they talk to and how they talk about women and girls. How are you going to do that? How are we going to see that in this story if we don't see those interactions? If we don't see how that boy treated that girl? Using your logic and the logic of the many people in the comment section who are making similar arguments, you wouldn't know until that girl's life is already over. And by then it's too late. This show was about the inhumanity of radicalized boys. How do we know it if we don't see it? I don't know why this is so hard for people to understand. I don't know why you're not getting what I'm saying. Showing the interactions that Katie has with this boy, the best friend, Ryan, whatever, isn't about humanizing Katie. It's about revealing the full picture of what a monster this radicalized boy is. That's what it's about. We need to know what it looks like. The parents of these boys that they're targeting on the internet, the community, neighbors, teachers, they need to know what this looks like because they're not aware that it's a problem. And yes, the show made them aware that it's a problem. People who knew nothing now know there's an underground incel culture that's targeting their boys, etc., etc. Like I said in my previous video, I tried to post something again about this last night, but it got flagged for bullying. Choosing to include scenes like that does not detract from the point of the story. It actually enhances it.